Okay, good afternoon. We'll just get started. Is the voice okay? Are you able to hear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. So we'll just get started and we will complete about 15 minutes earlier because we have a quiz coming up. Now let's get started with what we were doing last time. We had said that risk leads to improved performance compared to the CISC architecture. Now, the question is that why it leads to improved performance. We're trying to answer this last time. The first thing is about larger number of registers. Very meaningful to have hundreds of visible registers. Maybe 32 is a good number, and thousands of invisible registers. The invisible register, the role of these will be clear as we proceed in this course, and also in the next level course. The importance of invisible registers will be clear. And not only the registers, but the cache. In the CISC computers, it was difficult to have an on-chip cache. The cache was external, and now we have huge cache inside. And I'm just mentioning that about 50% of the chip area now is devoted to the cache. And the registers and the cache, they decrease the data traffic to the memory. And we were arguing last time that why does the data traffic decreases? And I think some of you answered and said that instead of each time storing back to memory, we can have the storage and also the cache, and the data is processed because these are general purpose registers, and then another set of registers is taken up and so on. And consequently, there is a big speed up because memory access is 1,000 times, 1,000, the order of 1,000 slower than the cache access. And register access, of course, faster than the cache access. And we will answer this question also as we proceed, that why is register access faster than cache access? Sankalp, you have any question? No.
No, sir, the mic went on by mistake.
Okay, no problem. And also, since all the instructions here, we'll see all the instructions, excepting the load store instructions, have register operands, and therefore the size is uniform. If some were memory operands and so on, the size will be non-uniform because memory addresses are large. And we will see that this leads to efficient pipelining. But on the minus side or the negative side, we have increased instruction memory traffic. The size of the programs increases, and we were trying to argue last time why the size of the program increases compared to a CISC processor. And we argued something like 4 times for even simple instructions, and for string instructions it may be hundreds of RISC instruction compared to one CISC instruction. Now let's look at this aspect little more, that why does the instruction size increase in RISC? Let's take an example. The simplest example, that we want to add two values from the operands, are the values are in memory, and store the result back in memory. In CISC, we just write a single instruction like this one. ADM says that it is memory operands, and the source operands are memory addresses. The destination is also memory address. Just a single instruction to add two operands in memory and store back the result in the memory. But in RISC, we'll write something like this, that fetch the operand at 1004 to R1, fetch the operand at residing in the memory location 1008 to R2, then add R1, R2 to get the result in R3, and then store R3 at 1000. So even for this simple instruction, we have 4 times the number of instruction. For string instructions and so on, it will be hundreds of RISC instruction for a single CISC instruction. Now let's conclude our discussion on CISC and RISC. Just to summarize, CISC is hardware driven, whereas RISC is software driven. Can anybody explain why is we call CISC as hardware driven? What about
Sir,
yes, yeah, please.
because since the instructions are already very complicated, most of the functionality is implemented in the hardware only. Whereas in RISC, since the functions are like they do very primitive tasks, so the software would have to do most of the implementation.
Okay, close answer. Mainak, thank you. Actually, CISC, we have the instructions, complex instructions implemented in hardware. For example, string comparison. Whereas in RISC, we'll have to write the algorithm for string comparison and do every bit of operation, so it is software driven. The complex instruction, algorithms, everything is implemented in hardware. And not surprisingly, the cycle per instruction is much greater than 1 for CISC and is equal to 1 for RISC. That means every cycle one instruction completes, and we have written here ideally because it becomes slightly more than 1. We'll see that why as we discuss about pipelining and so on, it becomes more than 1. Some of you might guess that the load store have memory operands that take more time. Okay, that's some part of the reason, but there are other reasons like pipeline hazards and so on. We'll look at that as we proceed. The CISC is called as memory architecture, and the reason it is called memory architecture is that every instruction can have memory operands. Somebody may ask you, if you have done this course, that what is a memory architecture? And you can say that every instruction can have memory operands as arguments. On the other hand, in the RISC, almost every instruction takes only register operands as arguments. Only there are 2 distinguished instructions, load and store, which can have memory operands. Memory operands cannot be there with any other instruction, and it is called as register to register. The source operands are in register, and the destination is also in register. Call it as register to register architecture. CISC, the program sizes will be small. On the other hand, RISC, for the same program, the code size will be larger. And in CISC, I think as we proceed, look at the control design, we'll see that the hardware is very complex in CISC because these instructions, just see that complete algorithm for string matching is done in hardware, and therefore all these are driven by the control logic. And the control logic is complex, occupies large part of the chip area. 50% of the chip area goes on implementing the control logic. Whereas in RISC, the control logic is simple, takes about 10%, less than 10% of the chip area, and frees up lot of semiconductor area. Large number of transistors become available, which we devote on cache memory and registers. Just to give a comparison of some of the commercial CISC and RISC architecture here. CISC architecture existed before 1980. The number of instructions, hundreds in each of these, IBM, VAX, and Xerox. The control unit, as you were saying earlier, that has a program actually, which we called as the microcode program, micro program. And we had a memory to store the micro program. Whereas see here in RISC, we don't have a microcode memory. It's a completely hardware control. Whereas in CISC, we had a microprogram control. The instruction size in CISC is variable. See here, IBM 370, the instruction size is 2 byte to 6 byte. And for VAX, it is 2 byte to 57 byte. Just see the variation. And VAX is the worst example of a CISC computer. Had instructions for string manipulation. IBM and Xerox didn't have. That's why the size is 1 to 3 byte. Whereas RISC, all of them, the IBM 801, Berkeley RISC, Stanford MIPS, all have 4 byte size. And addressing mode, the operands can be register, memory, whereas in the RISC, it is all register. Now, having got some idea about the instruction set architecture, the RISC and CISC. RISC and CISC, remember, these are very important concepts that somebody asks you, and what is the difference between RISC and CISC? What is the full form of RISC? What is the full form of CISC? I'm not spending time now because we are short of time. Otherwise, I would have asked you the same question just to check how many are able to answer. And then their characteristics, how they differ, and where from the speed improvement comes. All this we have discussed, and somebody will ask you, you will need this knowledge in future. But then, as you are saying, that before we can understand the instruction set architecture well, we need to become assembly programmers. We should be able to write assembly program, and the rest of today's class will devote on writing assembly code. And we'll write assembly code for the MIPS architecture, which is a prominent RISC architecture. MIPS was one of the earliest RISC architecture. It stood for microprocessor without interlocked pipeline stages. It is a pipelined architecture. We'll see what is pipelined, and it is unfortunate that we are discussing about, we are having to see the word pipeline without really discussing how pipeline, what is pipeline, instruction pipe, what are stages, what are the issues, etc. But let's take it granted right now that we are just listening to this word here, microprocessor without interlocked pipeline stages. And as we proceed, it will become clear that what is interlocking in a pipeline and why MIPS is supposed to be a microprocessor without interlocking. the interlocking is required due to pipeline hazards. We need to stall the pipeline, and here just see these MIPS, the idealistic design that was behind this, that without an interlock pipeline, it will become clear as we proceed. It is one of the first implementation of the RISC architecture, and Hennessy, the book that we are following, he was the main person here. And based on the research they had on RISC architecture, they set up a startup, the MIPS computer system, 1984. And their first product was R2000 in 1986. And imagine professor has set up a startup. He would not like to have a manufacturing unit, because that's too much of funding and too much of effort to have a processor manufacturing unit. What did he do? He said, we are not going to manufacture processor. We are going to sell our design. So he licensed the designs rather than manufacturing processor or selling the design. He could have sold the design to Intel or somebody who might have given him some $1 million and taken it. But what he did was licensed the design. That means if you use his design, see, the design remains with them. Professor Hennessy, the design remains with him, but you can use it. And for every processor you manufacture using that design, you pay him a license fee of $1. Small amount, but that's a huge money, because for every processor you pay him $1. And this is an entirely new concept. No hardware manufacturer till that time had done this, that he licensed the design. He did not sell his design, he just licensed his design. And later it came to be known as IP based company, where they just get royalty based on their intellectual property or their design. They don't manufacture. And the same thing was picked up by another company called as ARM Corporation. They also started doing the same thing. Just imagine, if you're doing something new, there will be competitors who do similar stuff. And ARM, initially called as Acorn Computers, and then it changed its name. They used to make BBC microcomputers, and then changed their name to Advanced RISC Machine, ARM Holdings. And don't be surprised that the ARM holding is grown into from a startup to such a large company that it is one of the biggest company in the UK. We'll have that story further in some other class. But then let's proceed with MIPS computer. MIPS has gone through several releases. This is the family tree of MIPS. On one side, on the left hand side, we have the 32-bit processors. And also there is a parallel releases of 64-bit architecture machines. In our discussions in this class, and I think next few classes, we'll discuss on the 32-bit architecture. Here is a brief history of the MIPS architecture, how it started. Hennessy and so on set up the computer. Based on this, they started selling the IP, selling the IP, and then it was sold to SGI, Sony PlayStation released, and so on. This is a brief history of the MIPS. I'm not going to read it. It's for you to read, but then, as I have been telling throughout this class, that we are in that matter, in any subject, The concepts are more important. These are the data details. We don't spend time on the details. We ask you to read up, and I have written your cursory glance just to know what happened. But if you start remembering all this, then I think you will have to unlearn or forget those things to be able to concentrate on the concepts. MIPS, those days, 1980s, 90s, became a commercial success. It had several new things, not only first RISC machine, but it used the IP cores. I said that they didn't manufacture processor themselves. They licensed the design. And it so happened that those time, the system on chip was just starting. We have not discussed system on chip, and this not the place, this not course is not for system on chip. But then I'll just tell you briefly what is a system on chip in the next slide. Just for your information, that a system on chip is used in all embedded systems, including your mobile phone. The processor is a system on chip. We'll see why it is called a system on chip. And the IP cores could be directly used on system on chips. And there were many buyers for the MIPS license. Cisco, Linksys routers, cable modems, ADSL modems, smart cards, laser printers, set-top boxes, robots, handheld computers, Sony PlayStation Portable, Nintendo, etc., etc. So it had huge uses, extremely successful, but then it had competition at hand. As I was saying that the ARM, initially a small computer startup in UK, manufactured something called as the BBC microcomputer. Name was Acorn Computers. And they were trying to expand. And they sent 4 of their engineers to Berkeley to get trained on RISC. And then they came and launched this ARM processor. They changed the company name into Advanced RISC Machine ARM. And they launched the ARM processor, especially designed for embedded processors. And it was commercial, unlike Professor Hennessy. These had very competitive. And in no time, MIPS Corporation was left behind. The ARM took up all the market. We'll come to that story now. But just to understand what is a system on chip. You know that in a computer from our first class, we know that we not only have processor, we have memory, not only the main memory, but also the permanent storage. We have other co-processors. In a mobile phone, we had a few years back, we had a separate chip for processor. We had a radio signal processing unit, radio unit, and then the DSP, digital signal processing unit. All these are chips. And also we had permanent storage in the form of flash memory, just like your pen drive or something. Flash memory, you might have used on your mobile phone, the flash memory card. And all these together used to make up this mobile phone. But now there is a single processor, and that single processor has 5 to 8 processors in it, huge memory storage, 16 GB graphics capability, Bluetooth, GPS, radio unit, wireless LAN, all in one chip. So in addition to the processor here, we have main memory in the same chip. We have the permanent storage in the form of flash memory. We have GPU, Bluetooth, GPS, radio, wireless LAN, and 5 to 8 processors, multi-core, and all that in just one processor. That is a system on chip. A system consists of many units: memory, hard disk, the co-processors like graphics processors, Bluetooth, GPS, wireless LAN, etc. Now all these different units of a system are there in a single chip. We call it as a system on chip. This is not the course where we discuss system on chip, but then as a passing remark, we just have this system on chip explanation here. And the use of this IP like MIPS, ARM, etc., all these, they don't really manufacture many processors. They get most of their revenue by selling their IP. I mean, licensing their IP, not real. Selling is not the correct word. Licensing their IP. And look at this picture here. If you look at 98, ARM had a very small market share here, and much less than the Intel. And okay, this is the ARM, and also the MIPS is this one. They had similar, ARM and MIPS had similar. But then over the year, just see the rate ARM holding has grown its market share. And MIPS has not expanded that much, but it was a significant player. But later it was taken over. And you can see the small history that I have written there. And is it surprising to see that the number of processors manufactured in millions of units is many times more than that of Intel? Is anybody getting surprised on this? See the PowerPC, see the IA32 is the Intel's, IA32 architecture is the Intel's architecture, and the number of processors on ARM holding is many times more than what Intel manufactures. And that was way back in 2002. And now the contrast is even more. Large number of small computers, small processors manufactured many times more than what Intel manufactures by the ARM processors. The different gadgets which had MIPS core, 94% share in cable modems, 93 in VDSL models, and so on. Color copiers, laser printers, huge market share in 2004. But then it used to be a very popular computer, later overshadowed by the ARM holding. And we are going to discuss the MIPS assembly language, the instruction set architecture. And we have chosen MIPS because it is there in the book that we are following, and also because it is a free architecture. Okay, our architectures are normally free, but then we have this accessible. It's there in the book, and also all RISC instructions are very similar. If you know the MIPS assembly code, you can also write assembly code for any other RISC architecture, for example, ARM. Just small differences. The important characteristics of MIPS, just like any other RISC, small set of instructions, only 111 instructions. And in this course, because we are going to discuss it in 1 or 2 classes, the assembly programming, we'll just discuss about a dozen instruction or maybe 20 instructions. We'll not look at all 111 instructions. There are 32-bit registers, as is the case with most of the RISC architectures. 2 high-speed caches, 128 KB each, All instruction size is 4 bytes and 1 cycle execution time. Every instruction completes execution in 1 cycle, but then what is unsaid here is that it is a pipelined architecture, and is 1 cycle is not really 1 cycle because of stalls and so on, that we'll discuss later. But right now let's assume that 1 cycle execution time per stage. Now the memory, as you can see, this is the main memory of the MIPS, and it is a 32-bit address, and it is convenient to look at this as a linear sequence of memory. Each memory placeholder here has addresses. This is 32 zeros to 32 ones. So how many addresses? 2 to the power 32, which is how much? Which is equal to 4 GB. Now each one holds 1 byte. This is a byte addressable memory. It is a byte addressable. Just see here, I have written here, it's a byte addressable memory with 32-bit addresses. So each placeholder here stores 1 byte. Each address stores 1 byte. And we have 2 to the power 32 such placeholders, and each one storing 1 byte. So 2 to the power 32 bytes is 4 gigabytes. And we had 4 broad classes of instructions. ALU, we look at the ALU instructions, the load store to get data from memory and store data into memory, the branches and jumps, and the floating point operations. We are not going to discuss about floating point operation in our assembly code that we are going to write. All our code will write using the ALU operations, load store, branches and jumps. We'll write several example programs, and we'll give you homework to write several, and also we'll have these in the tests to write assembly code for MIPS. And again, don't have to remember all this, just for your cursory glance, that large number of branch instructions. And I had said that when you read something, have a question in your mind that why is that the largest number of branch and jump instructions? On the other hand, the arithmetic instructions are less, 21. 15 types of load instructions, 12 comparison instructions. So why is that the branches are the maximum number? 8 logic instruction, 8 bit manipulation instruction. We'll also look at the bit manipulation instruction. 8 move instructions and 4 miscellaneous instruction. The instructions are very simple, programs are easy to write, and anything that is simple is regular. Then you have to remember very less. If it is complex, these are irregular, and all are special cases, you have to remember all of them. So all instructions are 32 bits. All ALU instructions have 3 register operands. Okay, small correction. Not all have 3 register operands. Let me just elaborate that little bit, even though so far we have been saying 3 register operands for convenience. But just to elaborate, there are 3 types of ALU instructions. All take 3 operands. One is register. Here all are register operands. The source and the destination are register. Whereas we have the register immediate, where the source, one source is in register, another is an immediate operand. That means the number or the constant is part of the instruction, and the result is stored in a register. And jump. But why is jump a ALU instruction? Is it a ALU instruction? Okay, yes, jump is the ALU instruction because the ALU is used. The arithmetic logic used unit is used here for address computation, that where to the jump will occur. I was saying about PC relative addressing. We need to do some addition with PC, some offset values and so on. And that is done on the ALU, and therefore this is also a ALU instruction. Register, 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 immediate, and jump. These are the three types of ALU instructions. The registers are 32 in number, numbered from 0 to 31. And each register we can either refer by number like register 0, register 1, etc., or we can refer it by its name. I'll just show you the name of these registers in the next slide. And when you write the register number, we refer a register by its number. We write $0, $1, etc., just to differentiate from a constant. Otherwise, it will become a 0 may be a constant, or 0 may be a absolute memory address, etc. To prevent that, we write all registers as $0, $1 in our assembly program. Unfortunately, we are coming to actually bit short of time because we have the quiz coming up, and today's quiz will be 12 minutes. Are we ready for the quiz? The TS, are we ready for the quiz?
Yes, we are
Yes,
ready.
we are ready.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So we have the quiz coming up, and the time is 12 minutes. And at the start of the quiz, will be given a, I think they will give a message, a chat message, and also announce voice announcement. And just before the end of the quiz, a chat message and a voice announcement. So best of luck. We will continue at this point from the next class. So please attend to your quiz.